The air in Riley's restorations was a thick cocktail of memories and chemicals, a scent Jack Riley inhaled more deeply than the smoggy Queen's atmosphere outside. It was the sharp tang of gasoline, the sweet, almond-like perfume of metal polish, and the earthy aroma of old leather, all layered over the constant low hum of a dehumidifier battling the East River's dampness. This small, unassuming workshop, tucked away on a side street in Astoria, was more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a legacy cast in steel and grease. Jack, at 38, moved through the space with a quiet, methodical grace that bordered on reverence. His hands, calloused and permanently etched with the ghosts of oil stains that no amount of industrial soap could fully exorcise, were instruments of resurrection. He wasn't just a mechanic, he was a craftsman, a historian of horsepower who could read the life story of a car in the patina of its chrome and the wear on its pedals. Today, he was meticulously recalibrating the dual carburetors on a '58 Corvette, his brow furrowed in concentration. The delicate dance of adjusting the air-fuel mixture was a language he understood better than the passive-aggressive dialect his wife, Chloe, had adopted over the years. Here, amidst the organized chaos of wrenches hanging like surgical tools and blueprints spread across a scarred wooden workbench, he was a master. The $55,000 a year the shop brought in was more than a living. It was a testament to the integrity of his work, a direct inheritance of his father's ethos. But outside these brick walls, in the glittering, competitive landscape of New York City, he knew that same number was seen not as a success, but as a failure, a brand of shame he was forced to wear every time Chloe introduced him at one of her corporate events. And he was beginning to feel the weight of that judgment settle deep into his bones. Under a heavy canvas tarp in the corner of the garage, a ghost slept. It was a shape both familiar and sacred, a hulking silhouette that held more than just an engine and four wheels. This was his father's last project, a project that had become Jack's inheritance of the heart. He ran a hand over the rough, dusty fabric, the texture a familiar comfort against his skin. The air around it seemed different, heavier with unspoken promises and the lingering presence of the man who had taught him everything. To Chloe, it was an eyesore, a tetanus hazard, as she'd once called it, with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, a monument to a past she was desperate to erase. It occupied the space where she envisioned a sleek modern wine fridge or a state-of-the-art Peloton bike, symbols of the life she saw on Instagram feeds and in the glossy pages of architectural magazines. To Jack, however, the oxidized steel beneath the tarp was a time capsule. He could still remember being a boy, watching his father's broad back bent over the engine bay, the patient way he explained the function of a distributor cap, the smell of his Old Spice cologne mixing with motor oil. Every nut and bolt was a memory, every patch of rust a story. He worked on it in stolen hours, a slow and loving ritual, sourcing rare parts from across the country, dreaming of the day its V8 engine would roar back to life, a thunderous tribute to the man who gave it to him. He knew with a certainty that settled in his very soul that this car was the last pure thing in his life, a tangible link to a world of authenticity that was rapidly being paved over by his wife's relentless ambition. But he had no idea just how much she was willing to destroy to escape it. If you enjoy stories of karma, hidden secrets, and the quiet power of the underestimated, subscribe now to witness how the truth always finds a way to surface. The click of Chloe's heels on the concrete floor was a sound that always managed to cut through the garage's ambient hum, an auditory intrusion from another world. It was sharp, impatient, and expensive, the sound of Manhattan invading his Astoria sanctuary. She stood in the doorway, a stark silhouette against the bright afternoon light, and the immediate clash of their two realities was almost a physical force. Her perfume, A complex and costly fragrance that spoke of boardrooms and rooftop bars drifted into the garage, a chemical invader that warred with the honest smells of oil and steel. She held a leather designer handbag in the crook of her arm, her posture ramrod straight, her eyes scanning the workshop not with interest, but with the cool appraisal of a health inspector looking for violations. Jack slowly straightened up from the Corvette, wiping his hands on a red rag that was already saturated with grease. He watched her gaze flicker over the tools, the stacked tires, the orderly mess of his life's work, before it landed on the tarp-covered Mustang in the corner. A faint, almost imperceptible curl of disgust touched her lips. "I don't know how you can stand to be in here all day," she said, her voice a carefully constructed melody of feigned concern that did little to hide the undercurrent of contempt. "It smells like struggle." She didn't wait for a response, her statement hanging in the air like exhaust fumes. It was her signature move, the passive-aggressive jab, the verbal stiletto slipped between his ribs with a polite smile. He felt the familiar, dull ache in his chest, the tightening of a knot of resentment. He was becoming increasingly tired of trying to unravel as she turned her attention to the mail in her hand, already moving on, leaving him to suffocate in the atmosphere she had just poisoned. The memory of her company's Christmas party from 6 months prior was a wound that still felt fresh, a humiliation he replayed in the quiet hours of the night. It had been held in a cavernous, glass-walled event space in Midtown, a place so high up that the city lights below looked like a scattered handful of diamonds. He had felt out of place the moment he'd stepped out of the elevator, his best suit feeling like a cheap costume next to the tailored Italian fabrics and bespoke tuxedos. He'd tried to stay close to Chloe, a nervous anchor in a sea of predatory smiles and blatant wealth. Her boss, a man named Preston with a trust fund tan and a watch that cost more than Jack's entire workshop, had clapped him on the back with a little too much force. "So you're the man behind the woman," Preston had boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. Jack had offered a tight smile, ready to talk about his restoration work, the pride he took in his craft. But before he could form a sentence, Chloe had stepped in, her hand on his arm, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like restraint. "This is my husband, Jack," she'd said to the small circle of executives, her voice bright and brittle. "He's very authentic." The word hung in the air, loaded with 1,000 unspoken insults. It was code, a polite way of calling him simple, blue-collar, a novelty from another lesser world. The executives had offered thin, knowing smiles, their eyes glancing at his worn leather belt and the hands that could never quite scrub clean. In that moment, he wasn't her husband. He was her social handicap, a piece of her embarrassing past she was obligated to display. The shame had been a physical heat that crept up his neck, and he saw in Chloe's eyes not an ounce of apology, but a flicker of cold, calculated satisfaction. The stack of bills on the corner of his workbench felt heavier than the cast-iron engine block he'd hoisted earlier that day. Electricity for the shop, the mortgage on their modest house, the ever-increasing credit card statements that detailed Chloe's relentless pursuit of a lifestyle they couldn't afford. A $400 brunch here, a $700 pair of shoes there, small, individual cuts that were bleeding their finances dry. His annual income of $55,000 had always felt like enough. It was an honest wage, earned through skill and sweat. It kept the lights on, put food on the table, and allowed him to invest back into the business his father had built from nothing. In most of America, he would be considered solidly middle class, a man providing a comfortable life. But in Chloe's New York City, a world viewed through the curated lens of social media influencers and her billionaire colleagues, $55K a year was a pittance, a source of perpetual embarrassment. He could feel the pressure from her in the way she'd sigh dramatically while scrolling through real estate apps on her phone, the way she'd casually mention the Hamptons weekend getaways her co-workers were taking. The unspoken accusation was always there. You are not enough. You are not providing enough. Your contentment is holding me back. He picked up the electric bill, the number glaring at him under the fluorescent light, and felt a profound sense of exhaustion. He was working 60-hour weeks, pouring his heart and soul into his craft, only to feel like he was failing at the one job that was supposed to matter most to her, the job of being rich. The weight of her aspirations was a physical burden, and he was starting to worry that it would eventually crush not just their finances, but the very foundation of who he was. In the quiet solitude of a Saturday afternoon, with Chloe out for one of her endless networking brunches, Jack finally allowed himself to commune with the Mustang. He approached the tarp not as a mechanic, but as a keeper of a sacred trust. His fingers found the worn hem, and with a slow, deliberate motion, he pulled the heavy canvas back. The garage light fell upon the car's form, revealing not just a vehicle, but a piece of history sleeping under a blanket of dust and time. The paint, once a vibrant candy apple red, was now a faded mottled tapestry of its former glory, with patches of primer and surface rust blooming like strange, earthen flowers on its steel skin. The chrome grille, though pitted and dull, still held the iconic aggressive snarl of a predator. He ran his hand along the fender, the cool metal a conduit to the past. This wasn't just any 1967 Mustang. His father had known it, and Jack had confirmed it. The side scoops on the rear quarter panels, the fiberglass hood with its dual vents, the specific placement of the emblem holes on the grille, they were all telltale signs. This was a Shelby GT500, a legend born from the collaboration between Ford and the racing icon Carroll Shelby. It was a beast, a titan of the muscle car era, and it was his. He opened the driver's side door, the hinges groaning in protest after years of silence, and slid into the cracked vinyl seat. The smell of old, sun-baked upholstery filled his nostrils. His hands found the wooden steering wheel, his fingers tracing the cracks in the varnish, and for a moment, he wasn't in a dusty garage in Queens. He was a kid again, sitting next to his father, dreaming of open roads and endless possibilities, entirely unaware that the key to his future was locked away inside this very machine. The moment of confirmation had come 3 years earlier, on a rainy Tuesday that had left the shop empty of customers. Driven by a sudden nagging curiosity, Jack had grabbed a flashlight and a rag and set about finding the car's vehicle identification number. He'd found the primary VIN plate riveted to the driver's side inner fender, just as it should be. He meticulously cleaned away decades of grime, his heart beginning to beat a little faster as the stamped digits became clear. He scribbled them down on a greasy notepad and then cross-referenced them with the numbers on the engine block and transmission casing. They all matched. The real work began at his desk, the glow of the computer monitor illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He spent hours navigating obscure online forums and digital archives of Shelby American records, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He typed the VIN into the official Shelby registry database, his breath held tight in his chest. The screen refreshed, and the words that appeared made the air leave his lungs in a sudden rush. 1967. Shelby GT500, engine 428 Police Interceptor V8, transmission 4-speed top loader, color candy apple red. It was all there in black and white. A barn find his father had acquired from a farmer upstate in the late 80s for a few $1,000s, a forgotten relic that turned out to be the automotive equivalent of a lost Da Vinci. He scrolled down to the auction history of similar models, his eyes widening at the numbers. Fully restored, these cars were fetching over $1 million. He leaned back in his chair, the worn springs groaning, and stared at the screen, a dizzying mix of disbelief and exhilaration washing over him. The secret he now possessed was a heavy one. A life-altering truth hidden beneath a simple canvas tarp, and he knew instantly that he couldn't tell Chloe. Not yet. The secret wasn't born of mistrust, but of a desperate, perhaps naive romanticism. Jack harbored a fantasy, a grand gesture he believed could bridge the ever-widening canyon between him and Chloe. The $2 million was not an escape hatch for him. It was a tool, a means to an end. In his mind, the plan was cinematic. He would spend the next year pouring every spare moment and dollar into a frame-off restoration, bringing the Shelby back to its former thunderous glory. He envisioned the final result, the gleaming candy apple red paint, the roar of the perfectly tuned 428 V8, the smell of new leather. Then, on their upcoming anniversary, he would lead her into the garage, not to the familiar sight of a dusty relic, but to a pristine masterpiece. The keys would be in his hand, a map to the Pacific Coast Highway folded in the glove box. He imagined the look on her face, the shock, the awe. His plan wasn't just to give her a valuable asset, it was to give her an experience, a journey. They would drive from the misty forests of Oregon to the sun-drenched cliffs of Big Sur, the wind in their hair, free from the suffocating pressures of New York City. He hoped that somewhere along that winding, beautiful road, she would remember the woman she used to be, the one who had fallen in love with a simple mechanic, not the one who now seemed to be in love with an idea of wealth he could never represent. He wanted to prove to her, and perhaps to himself, that the best things in life weren't about the price tag, but about the shared moments, the freedom of the open road, the legacy of love and passion that the car embodied. It was a beautiful, heartfelt dream, but it was built on a fundamental misunderstanding of the woman his wife had become. Chloe's contempt had begun to metastasize, growing from subtle jabs into overt, dismissive comparisons. Her boss, Preston, had become the yardstick against which Jack was constantly measured and found wanting. She would come home from work, her eyes alight with a feverish energy, and talk endlessly about Preston's world. Preston just closed a $90 million deal for a skyscraper in Hudson Yards, she'd say, her voice full of a reverence she never used for Jack's painstaking restoration work. He took the whole team to Per Se to celebrate. The wine alone cost more than your monthly mortgage. She would describe his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, his collection of modern art, his sleek black Audi R8 that he drove to his summer home in the Hamptons. Each detail was a carefully aimed dart, designed to highlight the chasm between their life and the one she craved. Jack would listen, his knuckles white around his coffee mug, a bitter metallic taste rising in his throat. He tried to see it as her just being impressed, a vicarious thrill in a world of high finance, but he knew better. It was a deliberate campaign of psychological warfare. She was using Preston's life to dismantle his own, piece by piece. The subtext was always clear. This is what a successful man looks like. This is the life I deserve. Why can't you be more like him? The name Preston became a toxic presence in their home, a ghost of a better life that haunted every room, making Jack feel like an inadequate and powerless spectator in his own marriage. And a dark premonition began to form that this obsession with her boss was about more than just his money. The final escalation came in the form of a glossy real estate brochure left accidentally on the kitchen counter. It was for a new condominium development in Tribeca, a monument of glass and steel that screamed of obscene wealth. Chloe, feigning nonchalance, picked it up while pouring her morning coffee. "Isn't this place just divine?" she'd murmured, her finger tracing the rendering of a minimalist living room with a panoramic view of the Freedom Tower. "Preston is thinking of buying an investment property there." Jack took the brochure from her, his stomach churning as he looked at the price listed for a 2-bedroom unit. It was a number so astronomical it seemed like a typo, a figure that would require several of his lifetimes of honest work to even approach. He felt a cold dread creep over him. This was no longer about a new pair of shoes or an expensive dinner. This was a clear, unambiguous statement of her desires, a fantasy she was now bringing into their home. "Chloe, this is impossible," he'd said, his voice barely a whisper. Her face, for a moment, lost its cheerful mask, replaced by a flash of hard, bitter frustration. She let out a long, theatrical sigh, a sound filled with the weight of her disappointment in him. "A girl can dream, can't she, Jack?" she'd replied, her tone sharp and dismissive. She snatched the brochure back and tossed it into the recycling bin with a flick of her wrist, a gesture of finality that felt like she was throwing away not just the paper, but him along with it. In that moment, he saw the depth of the chasm between them and understood that she was no longer just dreaming of a different life. She was actively plotting a way to get it. A subtle but undeniable shift had occurred in their home's atmosphere. The air grew thick with secrets, charged with a tension that made the hair on Jack's arms stand up. It began with the hushed phone calls. Chloe would take her cell phone into the bedroom and close the door, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If he walked in unexpectedly, she would end the call abruptly with a flustered, "I have to go," her eyes darting away from his. Her laptop, once left open on the kitchen table, was now snapped shut the moment he entered the room, a digital wall erected between them. She started coming home later, attributing it to late nights at the office. But her explanations were vague, and she smelled of wine and a perfume that wasn't her own. A knot of dread began to twist in Jack's gut, a cold, sickening premonition that something was fundamentally broken. He tried to tell himself he was being paranoid, that the stress of the shop was making him imagine things. He wanted to believe in the woman he had married. The woman who had once held his greasy hands and called them the hands of an artist. But the evidence was mounting, a quiet accumulation of wrongness that he could no longer ignore. The easy intimacy they once shared had evaporated, replaced by a polite, cautious distance. They were like two strangers sharing a house, their conversations limited to household logistics and empty pleasantries. He felt a profound loneliness, a sense of being haunted by the ghost of his own marriage, and he knew with a terrible certainty that she was pulling away from him, sprinting toward a future that he was not a part of. The first concrete piece of evidence appeared, ironically, in the trash. While taking out the recycling one evening, Jack noticed a piece of official-looking paper peeking out from beneath a pile of discarded magazines. It was a photocopy of a vehicle certificate of title. His heart gave a painful lurch. He pulled it out, his hands trembling slightly as he smoothed the crumpled paper on the lid of the bin. It was a New York DMV form, and while most of the details were for a different vehicle, he saw, in Chloe's elegant looping handwriting, practice signatures of his own name. Jack Riley, Jack Riley, Jack Riley. Over and over she had been practicing his autograph. A wave of nausea washed over him. Why would she be forging his signature on a car title? He immediately thought of the Shelby. He told himself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe it was for her own car, a simple administrative task she was helping him with. He tried to force the more sinister interpretations from his mind, not wanting to confront the ugly truth they suggested. He shoved the paper deep into his pocket, the sharp corners digging into his thigh, a physical reminder of the betrayal he was trying so hard to deny. He went back inside, the house suddenly feeling cold and alien. He watched Chloe as she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, with a small, self-satisfied smile on her face, and for the first time, he felt a genuine fear of the woman he shared his bed with, realizing he might not know her at all. The moment of absolute soul-crushing certainty came on a Thursday night. Jack was in the small bathroom off the kitchen, washing the day's grease from his hands when he heard Chloe's voice from the living room. It was that low, intimate murmur she used for her secret phone calls. He turned off the water, the sudden silence in the house amplifying her words. The door was slightly ajar, and he stood frozen, listening. "No, Preston, he has no idea," she whispered, and a small, cruel laugh followed. "He's so obsessed with that rusty scrap heap, he'd probably be buried in it if he could." A cold dread, sharp and immediate, pierced Jack's chest. He couldn't breathe. He leaned his forehead against the cool wood of the door, his world narrowing to the sound of her voice. "I signed the title this morning. The junkyard is picking it up tomorrow. $700. Can you believe it? It's almost too easy." The number hit him like a physical blow. $700 for his father's legacy, for $1 million masterpiece. "He'll be devastated, of course," she continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy that was immediately undercut by her next words. "But he'll get over it, and the money is just enough to cover the movers for our new place." A pause. "I know, my love. Soon we'll be sipping champagne in our penthouse, and all of this, all of him, will just be a bad memory." The words, "my love," and "our penthouse," echoed in the silent bathroom, shattering the last remnants of Jack's denial. The love he had for her, the life they had built, the future he had dreamed of, it all crumbled into dust in the space of a single, whispered phone call. The immediate aftermath of her words was a deafening silence, both in the house and inside Jack's head. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren, the sound of his own ragged breathing, it all faded away into a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. The warmth in his body seemed to evaporate, replaced by an invasive, creeping cold that started in his gut and spread through his veins until his entire body felt like a block of ice. His heart, which had been hammering against his ribs just moments before, now felt like a heavy, useless stone in his chest. He backed away from the bathroom door, his movements stiff and robotic, and sank onto the closed lid of the toilet. He stared at his hands. The hands Chloe had once claimed to love, and saw them as if for the first time, foreign, clumsy, and utterly powerless. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt less like an emotional wound and more like a physical amputation. She hadn't just decided to leave him. She had conspired to steal from him, to destroy the most meaningful object he possessed, and then planned to offer him fake sympathy while laughing about it with her lover. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Every shared memory, every laugh, every "I love you" she had ever uttered now felt like a lie, a carefully constructed performance designed to keep him complacent while she plotted her escape. He sat there in the dark, the faint light from the living room casting a long shadow across the tiled floor, and felt the very foundation of his identity crack and splinter beneath the weight of her deception. He didn't know how long he sat there in the dark, but when he finally rose, something inside him had fundamentally changed. The searing pain of heartbreak had not vanished, but it had begun to cool, to crystallize into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Ice-cold resolve. The grief was still there, a hollow ache deep in his soul, but it was now encased in the air in their apartment was a sterile, refrigerated thing, a stark contrast to the living, breathing chaos of his workshop. It smelled of nothing, or rather the aggressive, chemical scent of trying to smell like nothing. Lemon-scented floor cleaner, the faint ozonic hum of an air purifier, and the ghost of Chloe's expensive, minimalist perfume were the only notes in the olfactory landscape. The morning light, filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a gentrifying slice of Astoria, was cold and analytical, laying bare the curated emptiness of their living space. Every surface was hard, reflective, and cool to the touch. A white marble kitchen island, polished chrome fixtures, a glass dining table that seated 8 but had never hosted more than 2. It was Chloe's masterpiece, a showroom she inhabited, and Jack was its single discordant element. He moved through the space with a practiced quietness, trying to minimize his own presence. On the pristine marble island, next to a sleek Italian espresso machine he never used, sat his backpack. It was a canvas relic from the late 80s, a faded olive drab that had softened to the color of moss. Its leather bottom was scuffed and scarred, the straps were frayed at the edges, and one of the zipper pulls had been replaced with a carefully bent paperclip. To him, it was a vessel of continuity. It had belonged to his father, and it smelled of his life, a faint, comforting blend of old paper, engine grease, and the thermos of coffee his mother used to pack. He reached for it, and as his fingers brushed the worn canvas, he saw Chloe's reflection in the polished chrome of the espresso machine. She wasn't looking at him, but at the backpack, and her perfectly sculpted lips were pressed into a thin, tight line of pure, unadulterated disgust. A look that said more than 1,000 venomous words ever could. He slung the backpack over his shoulder, the familiar weight a small comfort against the chilling atmosphere of the room. The worn canvas strap settled into the groove of his shoulder like an old friend. He could feel Chloe's eyes on him, a physical pressure on his back, even as she pretended to be absorbed in her phone. He knew what she was seeing, not a beloved heirloom, but a symbol of the life she was so desperate to escape. It was a tangible piece of the blue-collar world that clung to him like dust, a world she believed was beneath her. He walked to the small entryway closet, the soft scuff of his work boots an affront to the gleaming hardwood floors. Inside the backpack, nestled beside a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, was a small, dog-eared photo of his father, grinning, with a smudge of grease on his cheek. It was a private talisman, a reminder of a time when work was a source of pride, not a mark of social failure. "You know," Chloe's voice cut through the silence, sharp and brittle as shattered glass, "they have some really lovely leather messenger bags at that boutique in Soho. Preston's assistant has one. It's Italian. It would look so much more professional." The word hung in the air, a deliberate poisoned dart. Professional. As if his profession, his entire life's work and his father's legacy was something amateurish and shameful that needed to be repackaged in expensive leather to be acceptable. He didn't turn around, keeping his back to her as he reached for his jacket. He knew this wasn't about a bag. It was a referendum on his very existence, a quiet, daily erosion of his worth. If you enjoy stories of karma, hidden secrets, and the quiet power of the underestimated, subscribe now to witness how the truth always finds a way to surface. His work jacket was the next offender on her silent list of indictments. It was a Carhartt. Its original brown duck canvas faded from years of sun and countless wash cycles that had never quite managed to defeat the deep-set stains of motor oil and transmission fluid. The right elbow was reinforced with a patch of dark denim he'd sewn on himself one evening, the stitches uneven but strong. The brass zipper was stiff, and the collar was permanently darkened with sweat and grime. To Jack, this jacket was a second skin, a functional piece of armor that protected him from the sparks of a welder and the grime of a neglected engine bay. Each stain was a ghost of a job well done, a map of challenges overcome. The faint, metallic scent that clung to it was the smell of accomplishment. He slid his arms into the sleeves, the rough fabric a familiar embrace. As he zipped it up, he heard Chloe let out a soft, almost inaudible sigh of exasperation. "Preston wore the most incredible cashmere topcoat to the meeting yesterday," she said, her tone light and conversational, a masterclass in passive aggression. "Armani, it hangs so perfectly. It makes him look powerful, you know, like he owns every room he walks into." Jack's hand froze on the zipper. The comparison was so blatant, so cruel, it stole the air from his lungs. He could picture it perfectly, the soft, dark fabric of Preston's coat against his own stained, patched jacket. The chasm between the two men, between their two worlds, felt vast and insurmountable in that moment. He said nothing, simply pulling the zipper the rest of the way up to his chin, a small, defensive gesture against the coldness of her words and the sudden biting shame that flooded his veins. His final act before leaving was always the same. On a small ceramic dish by the door, next to Chloe's sleek silver key fob, sat his watch. It was his father's Timex Marlin, a simple, elegant timepiece from an era before luxury branding had become a blood sport. The stainless steel case was covered in a web of micro-scratches, each one a testament to a life of manual labor. The acrylic crystal had a small, cloudy spot near the 2 o'clock mark where his father had accidentally hit it against an engine hoist. The leather strap was dark with age, softened and molded perfectly to the shape of his wrist. To Jack, the steady, mechanical tick-tock was one of the most comforting sounds in the world, a rhythmic connection to the man who had taught him the value of patience and precision. He picked it up, the cool metal a familiar weight in his palm, and began to fasten the worn buckle. "Is that thing even accurate anymore?" Chloe asked, not looking up from her phone. Before he could answer, she continued, "Preston was showing me his Patek Philippe. He said it's not just a watch, it's an asset. It actually appreciates in value more reliably than the stock market." She finally looked up, her eyes scanning the simple Timex on his wrist with an expression that was a mixture of pity and contempt. "It's just, you should think about your image, Jack. That watch doesn't exactly scream success." The word asset echoed in his mind. She had managed to monetize time itself. He looked down at the watch, at the steady sweep of the second hand, and felt a surge of protective anger. This watch wasn't an asset, it was a legacy. It measured his life not in appreciating value, but in moments of hard-earned pride, a currency she would never and could never understand. He was finally ready, armored in the 3 articles of his identity that she so thoroughly despised: the backpack of his heritage, the jacket of his craft, and the watch of his father's time. He stood at the door, his hand on the cold steel knob, feeling like a soldier about to leave the pristine, hostile territory of a foreign embassy. The silence between them was thick with everything left unsaid, with years of her disappointment and his quiet resentment. He just wanted to escape to the garage, to the honest smell of gasoline and the reassuring solidity of steel, a place where he was a master, not a failure. "We have dinner with Preston and his team at Le Bernardin tonight," Chloe said, her voice devoid of any warmth. It wasn't a question or an invitation, it was a command. 8 o'clock. Please try to get the grease out from under your fingernails this time. We need to make a good impression." The final, casual twist of the knife. "We need to make a good impression, but you are the one who will ruin it." He didn't respond, didn't trust his voice. He simply nodded, a tight, jerky motion of his head. He opened the door, and the raw, damp air of a Queen's morning rushed in, carrying the scent of exhaust fumes, damp pavement, and roasting nuts from a street vendor. It was the smell of reality, and it was the most welcome thing he had experienced all morning. He stepped across the threshold, pulling the door shut behind him. The clean, sharp click of the lock sounding like a cell door closing, trapping him not outside, but in. The trigger, when it finally came, wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It was a whisper. Jack had come home late, the kind of late where the city has finally exhaled and the only sounds are the hum of distant traffic and the lonely rattle of the subway. The apartment was dark, save for the cool blue glow of Chloe's phone screen, casting flickering shadows from the living room couch. He moved quietly, not wanting to disturb her, his body aching from a long day spent contorting himself under the chassis of a vintage Porsche. He was in the small hallway, about to turn toward their bedroom, when he heard it. Her voice dropped to that low, intimate murmur he now recognized as her tell. It was the sound of conspiracy. He froze, his hand hovering over the light switch, his body instantly rigid. He held his breath, straining to hear, the silence in the apartment amplifying her words into a damning broadcast. "No, Preston. He has no idea," she whispered, and the sound that followed, a soft, cruel little laugh, was like a shard of glass in his ear. He's so obsessed with that rusty scrap heap, he'd probably be buried in it if he could. A coldness, sharp and immediate, pierced Jack's chest, a physical sensation so intense he thought he might be having a heart attack. He leaned his forehead against the cool drywall of the hallway, the textured paint pressing into his skin, his entire world narrowing to the sound of her voice. I signed the title this morning. The junkyard is picking it up tomorrow. $700. Can you believe it? It's almost too easy. $700. The number was an absurdity, a grotesque insult that echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of his mind. He'll be devastated, of course, she continued, her voice a perfect imitation of sympathy, a performance for an audience of one. But he'll get over it, and the money is just enough to cover the movers for our new place. A pause, pregnant with intimacy he had never been a part of. I know, my love. Soon we'll be sipping champagne in our penthouse, and all of this, all of him, will just be a bad memory. The words, my love, and our penthouse were not just words. They were hammers, shattering the last fragile pane of glass that was his hope, leaving him exposed and bleeding out in the darkness of his own home. The immediate aftermath of her words was a deafening void. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren on the Astoria streets, the sound of his own ragged breathing, it all faded into a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. The warmth in his body seemed to evaporate, replaced by an invasive, creeping cold that started in his gut and spread through his veins until his entire body felt like it was carved from a block of ice. His heart, which had been hammering against his ribs just moments before, now felt like a heavy, useless stone lodged in his chest. He backed away from the hallway, his movements stiff and robotic, a puppet whose strings had been cut, and retreated into the darkness of the guest bathroom. He sank onto the closed lid of the toilet, the cold porcelain, a stark contrast to the fire of betrayal burning through him. He stared at his hands, illuminated by the thin sliver of light from under the door. These hands, the ones that could rebuild a complex engine from memory, the hands Chloe had once claimed to love for their honesty and skill, now felt foreign, clumsy, and utterly powerless. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt less like an emotional wound and more like a physical amputation. She hadn't just decided to leave him, she had conspired to steal from him, to methodically and gleefully destroy the most meaningful object he possessed, his last tangible link to his father. She had planned to offer him fake sympathy while laughing about it with her lover. Every shared memory, every laugh, every "I love you" she had ever uttered, now replayed in his mind. But this time, they were tainted. Revealed as a carefully constructed performance designed to keep him docile while she plotted her escape. He sat there in the dark, and as the minutes stretched into an hour, the searing pain of heartbreak did not vanish, but it began to cool, to crystallize into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. A diamond-hard, ice-cold resolve that demanded not tears, but retribution. He waited until the rhythmic, steady sound of her breathing from the bedroom confirmed she was asleep. It was 2 a.m, the hour of ghosts and bad decisions, but for Jack, it was the hour of clarity. The grief that had hollowed him out was now being filled with a chilling sense of purpose. He needed proof, not for himself. He had heard the truth in her own voice, but for what was to come. He needed the unassailable digital evidence of her conspiracy. He pushed himself off the bathroom floor, his joints cracking in the silence. Every sound was magnified, a potential alarm. The soft pad of his socked feet on the hardwood floor sounded like drumbeats to his own ears. He moved through the apartment he no longer recognized as his own, past the designer furniture that felt like props on a stage, and into her home office. It was a small, sterile room, smelling faintly of her perfume and the ozone from her laptop charger. The MacBook sat on her white lacquer desk, its silver aluminum shell glowing faintly in the moonlight that streamed through the window. It looked like a hostile piece of alien technology, a portal into the life she had been living behind his back. He approached it with the caution of a bomb disposal expert. His breath held tight in his chest. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, panicked rhythm that seemed loud enough to wake her. He could feel the sweat prickle on his forehead, a cold trail down his spine. His hand trembled as he reached out, his fingers hovering over the cool, smooth surface of the laptop. This was an invasion, a violation of the trust he once thought was sacrosanct. But she had burned that bridge, and now he was willing to walk through the fire. He lifted the lid, the movement almost silent, and the screen flared to life, illuminating his face with its cold, white light, presenting him with the first barrier to her secret world, the password prompt. The cursor blinked at him from the password field, a taunting, rhythmic pulse. It was a digital lock on the door to her betrayal, and he had to find the key. His mind raced, his hands hovering over the keyboard, slick with a cold sweat. What would she use? He started with the obvious, the shared memories she was so eager to erase. He typed their anniversary date, 5. The screen gave a subtle, dismissive shake. Access denied. He tried the name of their first dog, Buddy Boy. Another shake. He tried the street name of their first apartment, the place where he had once believed they were building a real future. Ditmars Blvd. Nothing. Each rejection was a small, fresh sting, a confirmation that he was no longer a part of the world that mattered to her. He felt a surge of frustration, then a wave of sickening insight. He was thinking like the man she was leaving, not the woman she had become. He had to think about her aspirations, her obsessions, the new life she was building on the ashes of their old one. His fingers moved with a new, grim certainty. He typed in the name of her boss, her lover, the man who represented everything he was not. Preston. He hit enter. The screen shook. He took a deep breath. The sterile air of the office feeling thin and insufficient. He thought of the glossy brochure for the Tribeca condo, the one she had tossed away with such theatrical disdain. He typed it again, adding the building's address. Preston 443 Greenwich. He pressed the enter key, and this time there was no shake. The password field vanished, and the desktop bloomed into view. A pristine, organized grid of folders against a backdrop of the Manhattan skyline at sunset. The success didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a final, brutal confirmation of his own irrelevance, a digital key forged from his own replacement, and he knew that whatever he found next would irrevocably change the course of his life. He was in. The desktop was a window into her soul, and it was as cold and meticulously organized as the rest of her life. There were folders for work projects, personal finance, and apartment hunt. His stomach twisted into a tighter knot. He clicked on the last one, his movements now detached and clinical, like a surgeon examining a terminal patient. Inside were spreadsheets, floor plans, and a saved PDF of a lease application for the Tribeca condo, with both her name and Preston's listed as tenants. He backed out, his breathing shallow. He needed more. He opened her email client, the program loading with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell in the silent room. He searched for Preston, and a torrent of messages appeared, a running log of their affair and their plot against him. He read their words, their cruel jokes about his grease monkey life, their shared fantasies of a future built without him. The pain was so immense, it transcended emotion, leaving him in a state of chilling calm. Then he found it, a folder on her desktop simply labeled Legacy. His blood ran cold. Inside was a collection of documents that laid her plan bare. There was a file containing a low-ball valuation of his workshop, likely prepared by a forensic accountant. There were articles on how to set up a shell company, and there, in a file named Final Step PDF, was the document that stopped his heart. A high-resolution scan of the 1967 Shelby GT500 certificate of title. At the bottom, in the space for the seller's signature, was a near-perfect forgery of his own name. Attached to the same email chain was the correspondence with Astoria Auto Salvage, confirming the pickup for tomorrow morning for the agreed-upon price of $700, and a final damning message from Chloe to the junkyard owner. Please ensure it is crushed by end of day. It holds sentimental value, and he might try to get it back. The immediate aftermath of her words was a deafening silence, both in the house and inside Jack's head. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren, the sound of his own ragged breathing. It all faded away into a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. The warmth in his body seemed to evaporate, replaced by an invasive, creeping cold that started in his gut and spread through his veins until his entire body felt like a block of ice. His heart, which had been hammering against his ribs just moments before, now felt like a heavy, useless stone in his chest. He backed away from the bathroom door, his movements stiff and robotic, and sank onto the closed lid of the toilet. He stared at his hands. The hands Chloe had once claimed to love, and saw them as if for the first time, foreign, clumsy, and utterly powerless. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt less like an emotional wound and more like a physical amputation. She hadn't just decided to leave him. She had conspired to steal from him, to destroy the most meaningful object he possessed, and then planned to offer him fake sympathy while laughing about it with her lover. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Every shared memory, every laugh, every "I love you" she had ever uttered now felt like a lie, a carefully constructed performance designed to keep him complacent while she plotted her escape. He sat there in the dark, the faint light from the living room casting a long shadow across the tiled floor, and felt the very foundation of his identity crack and splinter beneath the weight of her deception. The man who had walked into this house an hour ago, a husband tired from a long day's work, was gone, and he wasn't sure who or what would be left in his place when the sun rose. He didn't know how long he sat there in the dark, but when he finally rose, something inside him had fundamentally changed. The searing pain of heartbreak had not vanished, but it had begun to cool, to crystallize into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous: ice-cold resolve. The grief was still there, a hollow ache deep in his soul, but it was now encased in a layer of glacial calm. He needed proof, not for himself. He had heard the truth in her own voice, but for the war that was to come. He needed the unassailable digital evidence of her conspiracy. He pushed himself off the toilet lid, his joints cracking in the silence of the apartment. Every sound was magnified, a potential alarm that could detonate his new, fragile purpose. The soft pad of his socked feet on the hardwood floor sounded like drum beats to his own ears as he moved through the living space he no longer recognized as his own. The designer furniture, the minimalist art, it all felt like props on a stage where he had been the unwitting fool. He reached her home office, a small, sterile room that smelled faintly of her expensive perfume and the ozone from her laptop charger. The MacBook sat on her white lacquer desk, its silver aluminum shell glowing faintly in the moonlight that streamed through the window. It looked like a hostile piece of alien technology, a portal into the life she had been living behind his back. He approached it with the caution of a bomb disposal expert, his breath held tight in his chest, his heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, panicked rhythm that seemed loud enough to wake her. He could feel the sweat prickle on his forehead, a cold trail that traced a path down his spine. His hand trembled as he reached out, his fingers hovering over the cool, smooth surface of the laptop. Knowing that lifting the lid was an act of finality from which there was no return, the cursor blinked at him from the password field, a taunting, rhythmic pulse against the cold blue light of the screen. It was a digital lock on the door to her betrayal, and he had to find the key. His mind raced, his hands hovering over the keyboard, slick with a cold sweat that made the keys feel slippery and foreign. He started with the obvious, the shared memories she was so eager to erase from her life. He typed their anniversary date, his fingers moving with a muscle memory that now felt like a cruel joke. 814215. The screen gave a subtle, dismissive shake, a silent rejection. He tried the name of the stray dog they had adopted in their first year together, a scruffy mutt he had loved more than anything. Buddy Boy. Another shake, more forceful this time. He tried the street name of their first apartment in Sunnyside, the place where he had once believed they were building a real future, brick by brick. Ditmars Bluvd. Nothing. Each rejection was a small, fresh sting, a digital confirmation that the man he was, the life they had shared, was no longer the key to any part of her world. He felt a surge of bitter frustration, then a wave of sickening insight. He was thinking like the man she was leaving, not the woman she had become. Her password wouldn't be rooted in the past, it would be a key to her future. His fingers moved with a new, grim certainty. He typed in the name of her boss, her lover, the man who represented everything he was not. Preston 443 Greenwich. He pressed the enter key, his eyes fixed on the screen, and this time there was no shake. The password field vanished, and her desktop bloomed into view. A pristine, organized grid of folders against a backdrop of the Manhattan skyline at sunset. The success didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a final, brutal confirmation of his own irrelevance, a digital door unlocked with the name of his own replacement. He was in. The desktop was a window into her soul, and it was as cold and meticulously organized as the rest of her life. There were folders for work projects, personal finance, and one that made his stomach twist into a tighter knot. Next chapter. His movements were now detached and clinical, like a surgeon examining a terminal patient. He clicked on the folder, his hand steady despite the tremor running through his body. Inside were spreadsheets detailing her projected expenses, floor plans for multi-million-dollar apartments, and a saved PDF of a lease application for a penthouse in the Tribeca condo complex she had shown him the brochure for. Both her name and Preston's were listed as tenants, their digital signatures already affixed. He backed out, his breathing shallow and even. He needed more. He opened her email client, the program loading with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell in the silent room. He searched for Preston, and a torrent of messages appeared, a running log of their affair and their plot against him that stretched back over a year. He forced himself to read their words, their cruel jokes about his grease monkey life, their shared fantasies of a future built without him. The pain was so immense it transcended emotion, leaving him in a state of chilling calm. He was no longer a husband discovering infidelity. He was an investigator gathering intelligence on an enemy. Then his eyes landed on a folder on her desktop he hadn't noticed before, its name a chilling piece of irony that made his blood run cold. Jack's Legacy. He clicked open the Jack's Legacy folder, a cold dread settling in his gut like a block of cement. It was not a collection of memories, it was a file of demolition. The contents laid her plan bare with the cold, methodical precision of a corporate takeover. The first file was a PDF from a forensic accounting firm, a name he recognized from the letterhead of Preston's company. It was a complete, clandestine valuation of his business, Riley's Restorations, and deliberately low-balled and filled with language about depreciating assets and limited growth potential. They had been dissecting his life's work, his father's legacy, reducing it to a set of disappointing numbers on a spreadsheet. The next folder contained downloaded articles and legal notes on how to set up a shell company in Delaware, presumably to hide assets during a divorce proceeding. She hadn't just been planning to leave, she had been preparing to financially annihilate him. And then he saw it, in a file named Final Step Signed PDF. It was the document that stopped his heart and turned the ice in his veins to vapor. A high-resolution scan of the 1967 Shelby GT500 certificate of title. At the bottom, in the space for the seller's signature, was a near-perfect forgery of his own name, practiced and confident. Attached to the same email chain where she had sent this file to herself was the correspondence with Astoria Auto Salvage, confirming the pickup for tomorrow morning for the agreed-upon price of $700. The final email, Sent just hours ago from Chloe to the junkyard owner was the blow that shattered his last remaining shard of humanity. It read, "Please ensure it is crushed by end of day tomorrow. It holds sentimental value and my husband might try to get it back. I need a clean break." It wasn't just a sale, it was an execution, a final, spiteful act designed to destroy the very soul of the man she was leaving behind. He stepped out of the apartment building and into the pre-dawn chill of a New York morning. The air was thin and sharp, smelling of damp pavement and the distant, yeasty aroma of a bakery starting its day. The city was still in a state of suspended animation, a quiet hum beneath the surface of the silence. But inside Jack, a lifetime of slumbering instincts had roared to violent life. The hollowed-out feeling of betrayal, the raw, bleeding wound of the night before, had been cauterized by the cold fire of her final damning email. "Please ensure it is crushed by end of day." It was not a crime of passion or desperation. It was an act of calculated annihilation. An attempt to erase not just an object, but his entire history, his very soul. He walked past his own workshop, the dark windows staring back at him like the eyes of a trusted friend he was about to betray for a greater cause. He did not slow down. His destination was not the familiar comfort of his tools and his trade. The man who had left that apartment was not the same one who had entered it the night before. The mechanic was gone. In his place stood an architect of consequence, a man whose methodical, patient mind, once used to meticulously rebuild engines, was now focused on the systematic dismantling of a life, his wife's. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his fingers steady and precise as they scrolled through his contacts. He bypassed the everyday names, suppliers, clients, friends, and stopped at an entry that had lain dormant for years, a relic of a past life he rarely spoke of. The name was simply A. Vance. No title, no company, just a number. He pressed the call button, the phone cool against his ear. The electronic ringing felt unnaturally loud in the quiet street. After 2 rings, the line clicked open, and a voice, sharp and alert, even at this ungodly hour, answered with a single word: "Talk." Jack took a breath, the cold air filling his lungs, and when he spoke, his own voice was unrecognizable, stripped of all warmth and hesitation, replaced by a chilling, level authority. "Vance," he said, "I'm calling in the marker. I need you to build me a fortress and sharpen me an axe." The meeting took place not in a gleaming midtown tower, but in the back booth of a 24-hour Ukrainian diner in the East Village, a place saturated with the smells of fried onions, strong coffee, and decades of hushed conversations. The vinyl on the booth was cracked, and the fluorescent lights hummed a weary tune. Adrian Vance looked perfectly out of place, and yet completely at home. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than Jack's monthly mortgage, but his demeanor was that of a street fighter, his eyes missing nothing. He sipped his black coffee as Jack laid out the situation, not with the rambling panic of a wronged husband, but with the dispassionate precision of an analyst delivering a battlefield assessment. Jack slid his phone across the sticky tabletop, the screen displaying the secure folder where he had transferred copies of every damning piece of evidence from Chloe's laptop. The forged certificate of title, the email chain with the junkyard, the intimate and condescending messages with Preston, the forensic accounting of his business, the plans for the Tribeca penthouse. It was all there, a digital tapestry of treachery. Vance absorbed the information in silence, his sharp gaze flicking across the screen, his only reaction a slight, almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. He was not just a lawyer, he was a specialist, a man who operated in the gray spaces where law, finance, and retribution intersected. When Jack finished, Vance leaned back, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "She thinks she's a wolf hunting a sheep," Vance murmured, his voice a low growl. "But she's a house cat who just tried to steal a steak from a sleeping tiger." He began to speak, and the words he used were weapons, ex parte emergency motion, irrevocable deed of trust, criminal complaint for felony fraud, alienation of affection tort. He sketched out the strategy on a napkin, a beautiful and brutal architecture of legal and financial ruin. "The forgery is the key," Vance explained, his eyes gleaming with intellectual savagery. "She didn't just break a marriage, she committed a federal crime. She handed us the loaded gun, Jack. And the beautiful part, the part that makes this pure poetry, is that she has absolutely no idea what the gun is actually worth." Leaving Vance to begin drafting the initial motions, Jack walked out into a city that was now beginning to stir. The rising sun cast a pale, watery light on the brick facades of the old buildings, and the streets were filling with the first wave of commuters. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. He walked into his workshop, the familiar smells of oil and aged leather wrapping around him like a shroud. He stood before the tarp-covered Shelby, the sleeping giant at the center of this storm. For a moment, a wave of the old sentimentality washed over him. The memories of his father, the dreams of the open road. He ruthlessly suppressed it. This was no longer a sacred relic. It was an asset. It was the capital he needed to fund his war. He pulled out his phone again, his fingers moving with a new, cold purpose. He found the contact for Marcus Thorne, the reclusive tech billionaire whose collection of hypercars Jack quietly maintained. Thorne was a man who valued three things above all else: precision, integrity, and discretion. Jack had earned his trust not with flattery, but with his hands, once spending 36 straight hours recalibrating the intricate fuel injection system on his McLaren F1. He composed a text message, each word chosen with surgical care. He attached the photos of the Shelby's VIN plate, the official registry documentation, and the matching serial numbers from the engine and transmission. The message was brief and professional. "Marcus, the 67 GT500 we once discussed, a unique acquisition opportunity has presented itself. Requires immediate action to secure the asset. Full authentication package attached. Please advise on your interest level by 7 a.m. EST. He hit send, and the message vanished into the ether. The silence that followed was immense, a crushing weight of possibility. The ticking of his father's Timex on his wrist sounded like a bomb counting down. He was liquidating his father's legacy, betting his entire future on the whim of a man who could buy a small country on a rounding error. After 3 minutes that felt like 3 years, his phone buzzed. It was a reply from Thorne, and it was a single, cryptic question that demonstrated just how well the billionaire understood the game. "Is this a strategic liquidation or a fire sale?" Jack stared at the question, a slow smile touching his lips for the first time in what felt like a decade. He understood instantly. Thorne wasn't just asking about the car. He was asking about Jack. A fire sale was the act of a victim, a man desperate for cash. A strategic liquidation was the move of a player, a man repositioning his assets for a new venture. The price would reflect the answer. This was a test. Jack's fingers moved across the screen, typing his reply with unwavering confidence. "Strategic liquidation. The asset is being moved to prevent a hostile and fraudulent seizure." The response was almost instantaneous. "Excellent. In that case, the price is 1.2 million. My family office will be in touch within the hour to arrange the wire and logistics. Send me the details for the new LLC you want the funds transferred to." Just like that, it was done. A life-altering transaction conducted via text message. Before he could even process the magnitude of it, his phone rang. It was a woman with a crisp British accent, introducing herself as Marcus Thorne's chief of staff. She spoke in a language of pure efficiency, discussing the formation of a Delaware-based LLC to act as a holding company, the opening of a private, non-disclosed account with a boutique investment bank, and the immediate drafting of an irrevocable trust. Jack, listening intently, gave clear, concise instructions. the concepts feeling surprisingly intuitive. The same part of his brain that could visualize the complex inner workings of a transmission could now see the flow of money through legal firewalls. He was no longer just a mechanic. In the span of a few hours, he had become a CEO, an asset manager, and a client of one of the most powerful men in the country. The trap was now funded, the legal cannons were being loaded, and all that remained was for him to go home and play the part of the fool one last time. He walked back to the apartment as the sun climbed higher, its light now sharp and unforgiving. The city was fully awake, a chaotic symphony of car horns, shouting vendors, and the rumble of the subway beneath his feet. He felt a strange, almost transcendent calm, the serenity of a predator who has set a perfect trap and is now simply waiting for the prey to wander into the snare. As he approached the building, he began the final and most difficult part of his transformation. He forced the tension out of his shoulders, letting them slump into their familiar, weary posture. He rubbed his eyes, not because he was tired, but to make them appear red-rimmed and bloodshot. He practiced a look of dazed, hollowed-out confusion in the reflection of a storefront window. He had to bury the cold, calculating strategist who had just moved over $1 million and hired a shark attorney, and resurrect the simple, blue-collar, authentic husband she so thoroughly despised. This performance had to be flawless. He opened the apartment door, the sound of the key in the lock feeling alien and strange. Chloe was in the kitchen, standing by the marble island, sipping an espresso from a delicate white cup. She was already dressed for work in a sharp-tailored suit, the picture of Manhattan ambition. A small, self-satisfied smile played on her lips as she looked at him. The kind of smile a person has when they believe they have gotten away with something brilliant. She was expecting a confrontation, perhaps the frantic, tearful accusation of a man who had discovered his prized possessions stolen. He gave her nothing of the sort. He simply stood in the doorway, letting his carefully constructed mask of devastation settle over his features, and allowed his voice to crack as he delivered the opening line of the final act. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice thick with manufactured grief. "Someone broke into the garage last night. The Mustang. They took it." Her reaction was instantaneous and masterful. A sharp intake of breath, the clatter of her cup on the marble, her eyes wide with a perfect imitation of shock and horror. She rushed to him, her cold, manicured hands gripping his arm. "Oh my God, Jack, no, are you okay?" she asked, her voice a symphony of feigned concern. He let her lead him to the couch, let her wrap her arms around him in a hollow, meaningless embrace, her expensive perfume filling his senses with the scent of her betrayal, all the while knowing that a process server was already on his way and a 7-figure bank transfer was about to burn her entire world to the ground. If you are enjoying this story of betrayal and calculated justice, please like this video. It helps us bring you more stories like this. Her performance of sympathy was a work of art, but like any performance, it had to end. After a few more minutes of her hollow, comforting words, a subtle shift occurred in her posture. The soft, concerned wife receded, and the sharp, efficient executive assistant took her place. She pulled away from him, the warmth of her feigned embrace vanishing instantly, leaving the air between them cold and sterile. She walked over to the sleek, minimalist credenza against the far wall, her movements now imbued with a crisp, business-like purpose. From a black leather briefcase he'd never seen before, no doubt a gift from Preston, she produced a thick, portfolio-style folder bound in what looked like genuine calfskin. The contrast between this object of corporate power and the faded, grease-stained fabric of his own work pants was a chasm in itself. She placed it on the glass coffee table between them. The sound of the leather on the glass, a soft, final thud. It was the sound of a gavel falling. "Jack," she began, her voice now stripped of all emotion, replaced by a cool, practiced neutrality that was somehow more cruel than outright anger. "Given what's happened, with the car and with everything, I think it's clear that we've been on different paths for a very long time. She unsnapped the folder's magnetic clasp, the click echoing in the silent room. She didn't look at him, focusing instead on the sheaf of pristine, heavy bond paper within. Preston's lawyers were kind enough to draw these up for me, to make things clean. She slid the first document out and pushed it across the glass toward him, her manicured finger leaving a faint smudge on the surface. He looked down, his eyes tracing the embossed letterhead of a prestigious Manhattan law firm, a name synonymous with corporate sharks and ruthless litigation, and saw the bold, centered words that confirmed the war had officially begun. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He reached for the document, forcing his hand to adopt a slight tremor, a physical manifestation of the broken man he was pretending to be. The paper felt heavy and cold in his grasp, its crisp edges a stark contrast to the frayed, uncertain edges of the life he had believed he was living. He read the legal jargon, the sterile, emotionless language that reduced their decade-long relationship to a series of clauses and sub-clauses. Irreconcilable differences was the stated reason, a phrase so bland and generic it felt like the ultimate insult, a bureaucratic dismissal of every laugh, every struggle, every shared dream. He scanned the section on the division of marital assets. His workshop, Riley's Restorations. I was referred to as a non-performing, depreciating asset to be liquidated, with the proceeds split after an independent valuation. A valuation he knew from the file on her laptop had already been criminally lowballed. The document proposed a one-time alimony payment of $5,000, a sum so laughably small it was clearly designed not as support, but as a final, crushing humiliation. Chloe stood over him, a silent predatory presence, her arms crossed, her expression a carefully constructed mask of pity. She believed she was watching a man crumble, a sheep being led to the slaughter, completely unaware that the shepherd was already in his pocket. He could feel the ghost of Adrian Vance's words in his ear, the legal counter-narrative of felony fraud and criminal complaints that would render this entire document a piece of toilet paper. He let out a soft, shaky breath, a sound of pure defeat, and picked up the heavy, gold-plated fountain pen she had placed beside the papers. He knew that with his signature he wasn't just ending a marriage, he was baiting the trap, letting the wolf believe it had finally cornered its prey. As he uncapped the pen, the faint chemical smell of expensive ink filling the air, she stopped his hand with a gentle but firm touch. "There's more," she said, her voice soft, as if she were doing him a kindness. She slid 2 more documents from the leather portfolio. The first was a non-disclosure agreement, a thick, intimidating stack of paper that would legally bar him from ever speaking about her career, or her relationship with Preston. It was an ironclad gag order designed to erase him from her new, glittering life, ensuring the authentic mechanic from Queens could never embarrass her in front of her new, powerful friends. The second document was even more audacious. It was a pre-drafted bill of sale and transfer of ownership for the workshop, transferring the business and all its assets into a shell company, a company he recognized from his late-night reconnaissance on her laptop, for the token sum of $1. She was attempting to steal not only his future, but his past and his father's legacy in a single, elegantly typed maneuver. "It's just to protect us both, Jack," she explained, her voice a smooth, reasonable lie. "It allows us to have a truly clean break, no loose ends." He looked at the signature lines, at the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of her plan. A fire of pure rage ignited in his chest, so hot it threatened to burn through his carefully constructed facade. He wanted to scream. He wanted to show her the screenshot of the $1.2 million wire transfer on his phone. He wanted to tell her about Adrian Vance and the legal storm that was about to break over her head. Instead, he channeled that inferno into the performance, letting it fuel the tremble in his hand and the single perfect tear that welled in his eye and rolled down his cheek. He signed each document, his signature a shaky, pathetic scrawl, a masterpiece of feigned despair, knowing that each stroke of the pen was another bar in the cage she was unknowingly building for herself. With the last signature drying on the page, a palpable sense of relief and triumph radiated from Chloe. The tension in her shoulders eased, and the mask of pity was replaced by cool, triumphant finality. She carefully gathered the signed documents, her movements precise and proprietary, and slid them back into their leather fortress. She had won. "I've packed a small bag for you," she said, her tone brisk and impersonal. "It's by the door. I think it's best if you're gone before I get back from work. Preston is helping me arrange for movers tomorrow." The casual mention of her lover's name was the final twist of the knife. She walked to her purse, took out her wallet, and pulled out a small, crumpled wad of cash. She placed 5 $20 bills on the glass table in front of him. "Here," she said, her voice laced with condescension. "This should help you get a room for a few nights until you figure things out. $100. A pittance offered as a final act of charity." He looked at the wrinkled bills, then up at her face, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a predator who has just secured its kill. He slowly reached out, his fingers closing around the cash, the paper feeling flimsy and insignificant in his palm. He nodded, a broken man accepting a final handout, and pushed himself up from the couch. He walked to the door, picked up the duffel bag she had packed for him, and stepped out into the hallway without another word. The click of the closing door behind him, not the sound of an ending, but the thunderous clap of a trap being sprung. The morning air in the driveway was sharp and clean, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and the distant promise of city exhaust. Jack stood near the curb, a statue of feigned grief, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn work pants. He felt a profound, almost out-of-body calmness, the serenity of a general watching his meticulously planned strategy unfold in real time. He could feel Chloe's eyes on him from the front porch, a mixture of pity, impatience, and triumphant finality. She was sipping from a delicate porcelain mug, the picture of a woman about to shed her old life like a snake sheds its skin. The sound of a heavy engine turning onto their street was the overture, a low, powerful rumble accompanied by the gentle hiss of air brakes. Chloe's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. This was it, the junkyard tow truck to haul away the last remnant of her husband's pathetic, blue-collar world. But the vehicle that rounded the corner was not the rust bucket she expected. It was a pristine, gleaming white Freightliner, pulling a fully enclosed, state-of-the-art vehicle transporter, the kind of rig that moved million-dollar hypercars to concours d'elegance shows, not scrap metal to a crusher. On its side, in elegant, understated silver lettering, was the logo for Thorn Logistics. Chloe's smile faltered, confusion clouding her triumphant gaze. A man in a crisp, dark blue uniform hopped down from the cab, holding a tablet. He approached Jack not with the gruff demeanor of a scrap hauler, but with the deferential professionalism of a concierge. "Mr. Riley, we're here for the Shelby." Jack nodded, pulling a hand from his pocket. The driver presented the tablet, and Jack signed his name on the digital line, his signature firm and clear. Chloe finally moved, walking down the driveway, the click of her heels on the concrete sounding sharp and uncertain. "Jack, what is this?" she asked, her voice tight between feigned concern and genuine confusion. "Who are these people? I thought you said the car was stolen." Jack turned to face her, and for the first time in years he looked directly into her eyes, letting her see the vast, cold emptiness where his love for her used to reside. "Stolen?" Jack repeated, his voice level. "No, not stolen, sold." He held up his phone, angling the screen so she could see it clearly in the bright morning light. It was open to his new private banking app, displaying a single recent transaction, large and stark against the white background. +1 200,000 USD. Her breath hitched. Her eyes widened, darting from the impossible number on the screen to Jack's cold, unreadable face. What? What is that?" she stammered. "That's a joke. It has to be a joke." Jack gave a small, humorless shake of his head. "It turns out," he said, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, "that the rusty scrap heap you sold for $700 was actually a 1967 Shelby GT 500. My father's legacy was worth a little more than you thought." The color drained from her face. At that exact moment, a nondescript sedan pulled up to the curb behind the transporter. A man in a plain gray suit got out, holding a thick manila envelope. He walked up the driveway with a brisk, purposeful stride, his eyes fixed on Chloe. He stopped directly in front of her. "Chloe Riley?" he asked, his voice flat and impersonal. She could only nod, her throat too tight for words. He extended the envelope. "You've been served." The quiet satisfaction of seeing a life rebuilt on a foundation of integrity is a powerful thing. Jack's story reminds us that true wealth isn't measured by the price tags others can see, but by the values you hold when no one is looking. What do you think is the most valuable thing a person can possess that money can't buy? Let us know in the comments below.